Achtung, Achtung. Here's Alex Ryan. You're listening to InYourHeadOnline.com.
All right, welcome to In Your Head. On the line, we have Ed Ferrara.
How's it going, everybody?
Good, thanks.
It's going pretty good. Yourself?
Excellent. I'm doing fine, thanks.
Good.
Good. First of all, I want to tell everybody to visit Ed's website at www.edferrara.com. And that's double R and then single R.
Right. F-E-R-R-A, single R-A.
Right. I get that mixed up quite often.
You're not the only one.
I didn't.
Tell you.
Yeah. On there you can find information about his upcoming book, and of course the Ultimate Insider DVD set.
Yes. Selling like hotcakes.
I got the DVD set. It was very good.
Oh, cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, we had a good time putting it together, too.
It's much better quality than other shoot tapes that are out there.
That was one of the things that we really were looking for, because, I mean, there's so many shoot tapes out there that when I got together with Kevin Kleinrock from Big Vision Entertainment, he pitched the idea to me. One of the things that he was stressing was the fact that he really wanted this to be, you know, head and shoulders above everything else that's out there that's a similar product to shoot an interview or anything like that. So, you know, we had 3 cameras set up, shooting the interview itself, and then just what they did with the post-production and putting in the graphics and effects and things like that. It looks like a real interview if we had, you know, a little bit of a nicer set piece than that big dresser drawer that we had there.
Right. So it's 9 hours long. So I think we're going to try.
Some people's definition of hell. Listening to Ed Ferrara and Vince Russo talk about wrestling and we only talk about it for 5 hours.
Right.
4 hours of extras, but
right.
It's entertaining. I've gotten a lot of letters and emails from people that you know came right out and said, you know, before I saw this DVD, I was a self-avowed, you know, Russo/Ferrara hater, and people walked away from the DVD with a little bit of a different understanding of what we did, what we went through, and who we are as people. Because, you know, as the writers, I mean, me much more so than Vince. I mean, Vince was on camera a lot in WCW, but I only as Oklahoma was on camera, and that was very limited. You know, people never got to see who we were and never got to hear us talk and hear our side of it. And, you know, people say, you know, I thought you guys were dicks, but you come off as nice guys.
Yeah, that's what I got from it, too. Not that I thought you were a dick before, but...
Yeah, you'd be completely entitled. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that think I'm a dick, but they don't know me.
Right.
So you're not a dick.
No, I'm not.
I'm slightly let down.
You're slightly let down that I'm not a dick?
Mm-hmm.
I could be a dick if you want me to.
Awesome sauce.
But I don't think that would help.
No.
No, I don't want to be a dick.
So we only have to keep you on the line for 6 hours instead of 10 to break the record.
Okay, good. That's good. We might have to do this in about 17 minutes.
What did you think when they told you Wade Keller was going to do the interview?
You know what? I was before I went to work for WWF, back when I first, you know, broke into that company, I was a Torch subscriber for years.
Oh, okay.
I always preferred the Torch of you know, at the time it was pretty much the Torch and the Observer.
Right.
And I told Wade when I met him for the first time, when we got together to do the video, I said, you know, one of the things I really like about the Torch is that, you know, you understand what a paragraph break is. So,
yeah.
I just could not read the Observer. It was just so hard on my eyes. But I was a Torch subscriber for a long time, Torch fan, Torch reader. I just stopped. I let my subscription lapse after I went to the WWF because I felt it was kind of a conflict of interest.
Right.
And I didn't want to be, you know, reading the sheets at the same time I was working. I was like, you know, let the sheets do what they do, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. So, and I had a great time meeting Wade. I mean, Wade and I still keep in touch. We email each other quite frequently and just drop each other lines, seeing how we're doing. And I didn't know because I had never met him. First of all, I thought he was a hell of a lot older than he is.
Yeah, I'd never seen a picture of him.
Yeah, I was picturing you know, some grizzled old fat guy that resembled comic book guy from The Simpsons.
Right.
And Wade is so far away from that. it was very refreshing to just have a lot of really cool conversations with him outside of, when we were videotaping the interview. So I was pretty psyched when I heard it was going to be Wade Keller.
That's cool.
And I had no idea who it was going to be. But then when Kevin from Big Vision told me that he had talked to Wade Keller and worked out a deal with him, I was like, oh, my God, that's great. I thought it was going to be, somebody like Mike Tenay or something like that, which would have been great. And I have a great relationship with Mike, and I really like him, and I respect him a lot. But I think that, that still would have, because Mike is, he's a play-by-play man, he's also a performer, and that might have come off a little bit as, it's a work.
Right.
And having Wade there, that kind of gave it an air of legitimacy. But I know a lot of people, when they first heard about it, were like, well, let's see what this is. Has Wade sold out? Is this going to compromise the integrity of the torch? And I don't think it's one iota. And, I mean, there was no edits. We didn't have to cut anything. There were no questions that he couldn't ask. Except, the only questions he didn't ask are the ones that we didn't get to because the 5 hours that we were shooting went by far too quickly.
It goes by pretty quick when you watch it. I was surprised.
That is amazing to hear, and that's wonderful to hear. Because just the thought of me sitting down and watching myself talk for 5 hours, not so much for me. But if people are digging it, I'm really enjoying hearing the comments that people are saying. And again, I have a lot of emails and I've seen posts and reviews and people saying, I'm already, I blinked and I was through the first disc. So apparently it must be pretty interesting stuff, and I'm glad for that. I'm glad that people are enjoying it. I'm glad people are getting a chance to hear what we have to say.
Yeah, it's really good. I noticed on the PW Torch site that they have some Ask Ferrara columns on there.
Yeah. Wade asked me if I would do that, and I did. I have I won't say a weekly column or a regular column because it's very irregular because my work schedule is kind of demanding right now. So I haven't answered any in about a week, maybe a little bit over a week, and I've got about 50 questions in my email inbox that I need to get to, and I've been getting to every single one of them one at a time in the order that I received them. So, but yeah, people are asking me all sorts of questions that. Some of them that we didn't get to on the discs or didn't get to, I did like a 1 hour audio talk with the Torch after the Ultimate Insider DVD came out, and I covered a lot of stuff there that I couldn't cover that we didn't get to in the actual interview. And some of the questions are going outside of those realms, and I'm also getting some questions that are, stuff that we went over in detail in the DVD or I went over. So for some of those, I basically, direct the people to the DVDs, not because I'm trying to show the DVD, because I've already spent, a half an hour discussing that, and I don't feel like sitting down and spending an hour writing it.
Right. Also on your website, you can buy the book, your new book, Dark Consequences.
Yeah, it's a book of short stories that I put together about a year ago. I put it out last summer, and I self-published it because I was getting ready to start working on a novel, but I've got the first 5 or 6 chapters written. It's just been sitting in my hard drive because I've been working so much.
Yeah.
But then I took some short stories that I had written prior to that, and they're all horror, kind of grisly. But I've gotten really good response to that, and a lot of people have been reading it, and a lot of people have been, sending me, emails, and people that I've been, talking to directly that have read it, and just a lot of people really like the stories in there. So that makes me feel good, makes me, want to actually get back to the novel.
That's cool. Speaking of books, did you read Death of WCW?
No, I did not.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you what you thought of it then.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, that's pretty much, I didn't have to read it, I feel, and maybe that's being closed-minded of me, but, I know who wrote it, I know what their point of view is. Their point of view basically, comes off to me, but their point of view is that Vince Russo, and by default me, had a major hand in killing WCW, and, you can argue either side of that as much as you want, and whatever you want to believe, you're going to believe. But the fact of the matter is, nobody knows what really went on, because there were a lot of backroom deals going on. How else was Eric Bischoff's company, the Fusion investors that were going to buy WCW, how come their due diligence process, when the sale was almost all but done, but they had to do a due diligence and go through the books, how come that process took, over a month 5 weeks, and then the WWF's due diligence process took less than 7 days.
Right.
You know, if there weren't already, you know, machinations in the works behind the scenes that were greasing the wheels for WWF and greasing the floor underneath Eric's company, you know, how could that happen? So anybody who thinks they have all the answers about what killed WCW, I think there's only one man who has all the answers to that, or most of the answers to that, and that's Brad Siegel.
Plus, Bischoff, his company was offering like $50 million at the time. And I think WWE bought it for like $2 million. Plus, they didn't buy any of the big contracts.
Yeah,
$2 million.
Yeah.
Oh, $2. I should have put a bid in.
I mean, yeah, and that's, again, that came down to, you know, when it looked like the sale was going to go through, what happens? Oh, they took away the TV outlet. So now it's a less attractive sale. So now for $50 million, they're getting the company and they're getting the product, but they're not getting an outlet to air it on. All of a sudden, WWE comes into the picture. They've already got an outlet to air product. So it's just, you know, there's so much that went on behind the scenes that I don't know about, that I'm sure the people who wrote that book can't know about, because I looked at the book. The only time I picked it up, I was in a bookstore, and I picked it up and flipped to the back to look at the sources, if they cited sources. And to their credit, they did cite sources. They had, like, I think, like 1 page of sources. And one of those sources was a radio interview with Mike Awesome, who, as we all know, was really, you know, the man behind the scenes, pulling all the strings at WCW. Nothing against Mike, but I mean, come on! If that's one of your 10 sources that you're citing, you're really scraping.
Right. That 70s guy, he was the puppet master behind it all.
Yeah, exactly. He was really the master behind the scenes. He ran everything by Mike Awesome beforehand.
That would have saved the company, quite frankly.
You would have saved the company?
Yeah.
I wish you could have, dude, because, you know, I didn't want it to go away when it did. But, you know, believe me, we went in there with every intention of saving the company, or at least stopping the bleeding. But what we had no idea was, from day one, when we walked into that company, Kevin Nash said it best in his Torch interview, that, you know, the Titanic had already hit the iceberg and we were taking on water. But nobody told us that, and we didn't find that out until, you know, a little bit of time had gone on. By that time, it was too late. So we were just basically trying to play catch-up every week, trying to stop the bleeding, but it just, you know, it didn't work out. And we had all the political problems we had, all the creative problems that we had, and at no point did we really get a chance to do what we went in there to do. We were hamstrung in one way or another from day one, and the rest is history. It just nothing ever worked out. We could never get traction again. And you can only restart so many times.
Right.
You know, and we tried to restart the product when we first came in, and then Eric and Vince tried to restart the product when they were brought in together. And then Eric was going to restart the product again when his sale went through. And I mean, that would have been the absolute last chance. I mean, there were already 2 restarts within 2 years beforehand. The audience was getting ready to say, you know what, we've given you 2 chances now. You don't get a third. So I would have hoped that it would have worked if that sale went through, but it would have been an uphill battle to win the fans' faith back, to win the fans' loyalty back, because the fans felt like they had been burned for so long and they had been leaving the product in droves. And it's hard to blame them.
Right. If everything went the way you wanted it there, what guys there would you have liked to build WCW around?
Well, I mean, some of the guys that we already were. I mean, Booker T, I think, was a natural to build around. He was a fresh main event babyface to use, and he was a phenomenal worker. He had so much charisma and personality. And he was a pleasure to work with. So, I mean, him, hands down. Scott Steiner was.
I was going to say Big Papa Pump.
Yeah, I mean, he would have been great to build around. Scott was problematic in that, you know, his health was always an issue because he had a really bad back. But I mean, Scott, to his credit, every night before he went out there, he was in the back for hours, stretching out and getting ready and preparing. So that way, when he went out there, he could go, and he did. He was another guy because, again, he was a guy who had built up and he was ready to be a main event heel, and he was a main event heel. Those are the 2 guys right off the top of my head that I think we could have easily, you know, gotten a lot of main events out of.
Mm-hmm. You think Steiner could still could be useful in wrestling, maybe to TNA?
I think he could be. I mean, it's difficult for me to unequivocally say that.
Right.
Because of the fact that I haven't seen or talked to Scott in, since 2001. So I have no idea what he looks like, what he sounds like, where his head is at, what shape his body's in.
Right.
But and the other thing with Scott is the ultimate hothead, and Scott would do what Scott wanted to do, and sometimes Scott got himself in trouble that way. And that's where it becomes potentially problematic as far as saying, is he somebody that could have a huge impact on the business? Yeah, he could, but sometimes he would have to basically keep his emotions in check and play it smart sometimes as opposed to just going like a bull in a china shop.
Yeah, I think that was part of his appeal on TV, though. Made for some good
Absolutely.
promos.
Because as a fan, I would have loved it. Because of the be like, oh my God, they're letting a loose cannon out.
Right.
What's he going to do next? But as one of the bookers on the other side of that coin, as Scott is out there putting a promo that's coming from Scott's mind, and I'm saying to myself, okay, Scott just rewrote the next 6 weeks of TV. So, it's very difficult because sometimes he would be like a dog with a bone. He wouldn't let go of it.
All right. You think we'll ever have the Monday Night Wars again, or anything like that in wrestling?
Not in the near future, not as far as I'm concerned. I don't see, there's no, I mean, at least when you had WWF and WCW, you had a clear number one, but you had number two wasn't that far behind.
Right.
Here, I mean, the closest thing to number two is TNA, and they're not ready to compete with WWE yet. And nothing against TNA's product, because I think there's some really, really good things about TNA's product. I think there's some really bad things about WWE's product. But when you get right down to it, WWE, when people think wrestling, first thing that pops in their mind is WWE.
Right.
And you can't get past that people identify with that. So TNA is going to have to be around for, in my opinion, a little while longer before people start thinking WWE and TNA.
Yeah. What do you think about the name TNA?
What do I think about the name?
Yeah, I kind of think they should change it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of, it's tough. When I first heard it, I hated it.
Yeah.
When I first heard it, because to me it just screamed out cheesy,
right.
We're going to have girls with cookies.
Right.
And it was like, give me a break, I'm not a 13-year-old boy that give me wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
But now, TNA has been around long enough that I can't give really a fair and unbiased answer to that question because I've gotten used to it.
Yeah,
Only because I've gotten used to it.
Right. I was just going to say, though, we've gotten used to it, wrestling fans. But one time when I had to call up an order instead of going to the box, and I asked to order TNA Hard Justice, and it just sounds so weird. I don't think they know it.
That's one of those movies that you ask the concierge at the hotel to take off your bill. When you
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Every time, when I'd be talking to somebody and they'd be saying, do you work for WWF, WCW, who else you work for? If it's somebody who's not a wrestling fan, but they know of wrestling.
Right.
Say, well, I work for a company called TNA, and there's always a little stoner laugh through the nose.
Right.
And you always have to qualify with, it stands for Total Nonstop Action.
Yeah, it's not like the updated Glow.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know what, though? I think they need to keep the name because they need to build that name.
Yeah, they've had it now for a few years.
They've kind of gone away from the whole TNA aspect of TNA, from what I understand. But and they've got to run with it. Update the logo as much as possible. Change up the logo every now and then, but keep the name the same because they've been building on that name for the past over 2 years now. They can't throw all that investment away.
Right.
It's like putting equity into a house and then just giving the house away.
Do you still watch your product?
No, I don't. I can tell you exactly how many times I've watched it since the WCW Invasion angle, which should have been the greatest angle in the history of the business.
Oh yeah, of course.
And it was one of the biggest abortions in the history of the business. I watched one time after that. I watched the night that Kevin Nash came back and blew out his knee in the main event on Raw, which was shortly after the invasion. That was after NWO came in,
right?
I believe. And I watched that night because I'd spoken to Kevin earlier that day, and he told me he was going to be on that night, so I made sure to watch. And then since then, the only time I've watched it was this past WrestleMania. A buddy of mine was ordering it, and he said, come on over, watch it, watch some beers. So
Yeah, you have to watch
I
WrestleMania.
went over and I watched WrestleMania this year, and the 3 hours of WrestleMania and the 2 hours of Raw when Kevin Nash blew out his knee are the only 5 hours of wrestling that I've watched since I left TNA, and then before that, since I left WWF. WWE, you gotta forgive me, I still say WWF because I worked for WWF, I didn't work for WWE.
Right, and I grew up watching, I think everyone grew up watching WWF.
Yeah.
Did you like your time at TNA when you were there?
Yeah, I did. I mean, it was a different kind of environment, but it was a small company. We were struggling to get it together, and it was a lot of fun being. I mean, I was working besides being the color commentator for the first few months. I was also in charge of all the post production during the week. So all the video packages and all that stuff, and editing the shows that we were pre-taping. I was in charge of all of that stuff at the time. So I was putting in, like 60, 70, sometimes 80-hour weeks. Not counting, also the day of the tapings. So it was a lot of work, but it was, it felt kind of cool being on the ground floor of something like that. And I enjoyed. I was very close friends with Jeff, and there were a lot of people around in the office that I was tight with. So I mean, it was cool being able to work with those guys again.
Yeah.
And being able to grow up Francine had nothing to do with how much you enjoyed it.
Actually, yeah. I mean, you know what? I'm a married man, and actually, my wife's name is Francine. So, but as far as I'm concerned, she's the real queen of extreme. And I made sure that she was aware of what I was going to do before I did it.
Oh, we want to hear those stories.
There's nothing to see here. Move along. Yeah, no. What you saw in the ring was all that happened. But that was fun though. Playing that character, that Lech character, that was a lot of fun because I thought that the stuff that I did with her lived up. Because I mean, probably the biggest pop I ever got, and one of the most fun things.
I was to bring this up.
Bill Barron's Jasmine St. Clair's lap dance.
Right.
That was a blast. I loved doing that.
That was one of the highlights of the early TNA stuff, I thought.
Because it came out of nowhere. Nobody was expecting it to happen.
No.
And I just love, and Bill Barron's is like one of the sweetest guys in the world. and I just had so much fun doing it because we did some stuff down in Wild South together too when he was constantly whacking me with a tennis racket and stuff. So I got a little back that night.
What did you think about working with Don West?
Don West is a sweetheart. Don West he was at the time. I'm sure now because I know how hard Don worked at the beginning, and because he came in and he knew that he had a microscope on him because he wasn't a wrestling guy. And he knew that the wrestling fans were they were going to be watching him, wait for him to screw up. And, and he was very concerned about that because he had a lot of respect for wrestling, and he did not want to have his presence essentially shit on the product, was the way he put it. But he busted his ass in the beginning and just did nothing but homework, watched tape after tape after tape. I mean, we would talk for hours about wrestling, about the product, about psychology, about everything from what moves were called to what effect they have. And I'm sure with that work ethic, I'm sure that his announcing skills now are light years beyond what they were in the beginning. I mean, and he's just a ball of energy to begin with.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like that in real life. I mean, not that he's screaming all the time, but he's always that upbeat. He's always that pleasant. He's always that energetic, and he's just a incredible guy.
Another highlight. My illusions.
Another highlight for me. Oh, what was that, Barbie?
You keep ruining my illusions of people.
All right, who do you want me to say is a jerk?
We want the dirt. We want you to bury someone.
He wants me to bury someone. I'll bury myself.
All right. You take the easy road.
I'm sure I'll do it at some point during the interview.
All right. Well, speaking of that, though, I'll have to ask. There's an incident with you and Jim Cornette that I read about online. When he spit in your face.
Yeah.
Don't you want to tell us what happened there?
Well, basically, what I'll say is this about that. Going back, Jim Cornette and Vince Russo and myself were always very much at odds in WWF, the time when we worked at WWF together.
Right.
I'm sure that a lot of what we did frustrated Jim Cornette because he didn't believe in the type of stories we were telling and what we were doing on TV, and as a result of that, a lot of personal animosity, I'm sure, developed. Also, as a result of the fact that how close he is with Jim Ross, my portrayal of Oklahoma infuriated him because I know it hurt Jim Ross. It had to because I know Jim as a person, and that something like that would hurt him. And I went into a long explanation of it. I'm not going to go into it here.
Right.
But I did that on the Torch Audio interview, and just basically, long story short is, yes, I feel horrible about having mocked Jim's Bell's palsy.
Yeah.
It was a horrible thing to do. It was a very shitty thing of me to do, and if I could take it all back, I would in a heartbeat. That said, the first time I had seen Jim Cornette in years was, since I left WWF, I was at an independent show in Nashville. It was right before right before TNA started up, and Don West and I went down to a show that Burt Prentice was promoting in Nashville. We went not down, we went up from Atlanta to check out the show and also to practice doing play-by-play. We had a little table set up in the bleachers, up in the crow's nest area, and we were just taping the show and we were calling it as we were taping it. We were going to use that as kind of like guys go out in the ring and they work out and they tape themselves and then they watch it later and critique it. That's what we were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jim Cornette was there that night. And I saw him from across the room. He saw me, and I walked toward him, and he walked toward me, and I extended my hand to shake his hand because I hadn't seen the guy in 3 years. And, I know that we had a lot of, there was a lot of negative feelings there from him towards us, but I didn't even think in a million years that he would do what he did. I went up to shake his hand, and he wouldn't shake my hand, and he walked up to me, and he just started cutting a scathing promo on me about, I'm not going to go into details. Just cut a long, scathing diatribe promo on me, and then before he walked away, he spit at me, and then he turned around and walked away. I'll say this. Jim has a right to feel the way he did. I went after, on TV, a very good friend of his and made fun of him, and that was a horrible thing. Had we had a discussion like two adult human beings, I would have been more than happy to explain that and to express the way that I felt about it. But the thing about Jim wasn't interested in hearing that. Jim is a very angry person, and Jim is very prone to outbursts, as has been well documented. And that was him putting on a show, in my mind. I mean, I think he meant everything that he said, but I think he was also, he made a point to do it in a very public way,
right,
with a lot of people, and it was incredibly embarrassing to me. I had to be, several wrestlers had to hold me back and stand between us after he did that and walked away. I can't remember ever being as angry or as upset, but you know what, even all the time I spent in the wrestling business, I'm not somebody who solves things by fighting and by violence. I'm somebody who I enjoy talking to people, and if you want to argue, that's fine, but at that point, that had gone in the past, and, I was just beside myself. I was so angry. But I left well enough alone. I stayed out his way for the rest of the night. He stayed out of my way, and I just, I couldn't get out of that building fast enough because I just did not want to be under the same roof with him. Like I said, he had every right to say what he said. He had every right to feel the way he did, but he crossed the line.
Yeah, it's a line.
Very out of line what he did, and you could come back and argue and say, well, what I did was very out of line. But you know what? I did that. First of all, I had done it several years prior. Second of all, I didn't do anything personally to him. He was standing up for a friend of his. I don't understand people who operate that way. I don't understand people who can behave that way because I like to think that I'm a bit of an upstanding person might deal with problems the way they need to be dealt with, as opposed to dealing with a problem in a way that just doesn't solve any problem. It just makes you feel better about yourself.
Right. Did you hear recently that he was let go by the WWE?
Yeah, that's what I meant when I said he's prone to outbursts and
right.
documented. Yeah, that's what I heard. I can't say that I was surprised at least.
Yeah. Do you think Paul Heyman will be a better fit for their developmental? That he'd get the guys in better training to get to WWE?
I think Paul E would be a better fit wherever they put him. I think that the fact that they've had him on the payroll for as long as they have, and they have not utilized him the way they should. I mean, they've got a room full of 10, 11 writers who are trying to do what Paul Heyman can do by himself.
Right.
And I think that comes down to that's the WWE ego that only we understand what it is that we do. And I think that that's where that comes down from. I don't understand why they would not utilize a mind like Paul when they got him there. And it boggles my mind. I don't know why they would do it. So if they put him in charge of OVW and they let him do it his way, I think he could be amazing. I think what he would do for those boys down there, and for that product, and for the developmental side of that company would be immeasurable. And I really hope they do. I just hope they give him a little bit of autonomy and let him do what he does. Because when he can do when he's allowed to do that, there's nobody that can stop him.
Right.
Do you think a place like OVW really prepares you to be on the TV? On Raw or
Say that one more
SmackDown?
time. You broke up a little bit for me.
Right. Do you think OVW can really prepare you to be on Raw or SmackDown?
Do I think that the OVW could be on TV?
No. Do you think that that it prepares the wrestlers to be on WWE TV?
To a certain extent, yeah. Because I mean, you're doing a weekly TV show. I think it's weekly, right?
Yeah.
You're doing a weekly TV show with that, and that has certain stresses and certain things that you have to keep in mind when you're doing that. Different deadlines and having to get your match to a certain amount of time because okay, you've got 4 minutes for this match, that sort of thing. Where it doesn't prepare them is a lot of guys who are going out on Raw or SmackDown for the first time are stepping out in front of a crowd that's like sometimes 10 times larger than the largest crowd they've ever worked in front of, and that's an entirely different audience to be playing to. You have to work differently. You have to work your psychology differently because big crowds. If you want to think of a crowd as a living being. All the people coming together to be one living being. Big crowds are a very different entity from smaller crowds, and you have to adjust the way you work in order to go as far as you can in front of that type of a crowd.
Right. It's 6 o'clock. Did you have to go?
Actually, yeah, I do have to go. But why don't we do just like 2 or 3 more questions?
All right. When asked,
Thank you though for keeping an eye on the clock for me.
Yeah, not a problem.
My fault that we got a late start.
Someone on our message board, Bob from Florida, he put up a picture of you. Actually, it was Rick Rude's mustache when you were beautiful Bruce Bodine.
Yeah. Are you sure it's a mustache? What?
Rick Rude's mustache. He's one of our fans.
Oh, okay.
It's not an actual mustache. It was...
Okay, I got you.
Right.
Yeah, that was back when I used to work indies in Southern California. Back before I got hired from by Vince and WWF. That was one of the ways that I got hired. One of the reasons I got hired because I was an indie worker, and I was a Hollywood writer producer. So Vince McMahon liked the fact that I brought to the table both sides of what he was looking for. He wanted somebody who understood wrestling and understood the psychology of wrestling and understood the subculture of the wrestling business. But also the flip side, he wanted somebody who understood show business and understood storytelling and understood that aspect of what they were trying to do. So that was one of the ways how I got hired.
Mm-hmm. What was one of your favorite angles that you helped write?
one of my favorite angles that I helped write.
Right.
I always say the Kane and X-Pac friendship because that was one that I pretty much did on my own, completely on my own because nobody cared about it as much as I did. And that was probably one of my personal favorites because there was so much real emotion in it. But probably one of my other favorite angles, you know, in WWF, it has to be, you know, turning the Rock at Survivor Series and that whole build-up to that at the Survivor Series Deadly Game when we had been supposedly building Rock as a babyface for months going in there. And then he ended up, Shane McMahon came in and it was all just a big swerve on Nick. And just the way that played out with just perfect precision. It couldn't have played out any better than it did. And just the heat that came at Rock at that moment once the crowd understood what had just happened. It was one of those things where when Shane McMahon flipped the bird, it was, you know, the crowd went absolutely deadly silent. And then all of a sudden the heat came and the boos came and it was just magic. So that was, it's just moments like that, you know. Sometimes you would have big moments like that with something big happen that you were playing. Sometimes it would be little things that you're like, oh yeah, that got over, you know, better than we thought it would. But it's those moments when you get the reaction from the crowd that you were anticipating, and you get it when you thought you were going to get it, and why you thought you were going to get it, and those were like the little rewards we would get along the way when the crowd would let us know, hey, you know what, this worked. Because I'm pissed now.
Right. Is there any...
Man wants to know what wrestler was the hardest to work with when plotting out storylines.
One of the ones that was hard, you know, it's hard because, you know, there's a lot of them that I had my problems with, but I mean, one of the guys that was very difficult to work with was, you know, Stone Cold. This is one of the things we talked about in the DVD a lot.
Right.
Because Stone Cold was very protective of his gimmick, and very protective more so of his slot and his status, and he didn't want anything to knock him down out of that top position at the time. And as a result of that, he didn't want to take chances and try anything new in a lot of instances. And I don't want to be unfair to Steve, but I'm just thinking about the times when we did have problems. There were times when everything was great. He loved everything that we wanted him to do, and it was, you know, it was a love fest. But then there were other times when he would just poke holes in every little thing that we were trying to do. Sometimes I got the sense that he was doing it because he was genuinely concerned, and other times I got the feeling that he was poking holes in what we were trying to do because he was trying to see if he could. And if we got to the point where he couldn't poke any more holes, okay, I'll do it. You've earned it. But he was very protective, and he didn't want to do anything to jeopardize his position and where he was. But as a result of that, what I think happened was he ended up just doing the same thing over and over and over again, and it eventually, you know, got old.
Right. All right, well, before we let you go, I just want to know, if a new wrestling started up and they offered you a job, would you take it? And if you did, what role would you want there?
Wow.
If they offered you enough money.
Well, that's what it would come down to. I mean, for me, I'm very happy right now. I'm teaching. I'm working at Columbia College in Chicago, and I'm loving my life because it's my life. When you go to work in the wrestling business, it's not your life anymore. You pretty much sign over all rights to your life to Vince McMahon. So, I mean, the main stipulation that I would ever have, I mean, I would never say no, that would never happen, or no, I would never do that. I think I can safely say no, it would never happen, because my stipulations would be whatever my involvement is, whether it be on the creative end or what, would be that I would not have to, you know, I wouldn't want to have to sacrifice my life for it. If it was a matter of, you know, flying out to TV once a week, okay, that's fine, you know, or not once a week, once a month or something like that. But I think that my demands, and I would want to be compensated very well, not because I think I'm all that, but I would want to be compensated very well because of the stress and the pain in the ass that it is, and basically I don't need it anymore. I went through that. I made really, really good money in the wrestling business, but you know what? I had really, really good headaches too. I had really, really good heartburn, and probably really, really good ulcers if I stayed in there any longer. and it's not worth it. I'm at the point right now where I'm very happy with my life, and I don't need that. I don't need it at all. So it would have to be a really, really attractive offer, and a really, really flexible offer in terms of what my life would be like for me to even consider it, because I'm not looking to get back in the wrestling industry. So if somebody wanted to make me an offer, they would have to make me a really, really good offer.
All right, we're going to make you an offer to be the fourth co-host on the show.
That I do.
All right.
That I do, because, see, I showed up to this interview about 25 minutes late. I didn't get any heat from you guys, so but it seems like a really relaxed workplace, so I think I can swing with that.
Yeah. Well, our co-host Barbie, he usually shows up about 3 minutes into the show, so.
That's what I like to hear. I like working at a place where they're happy to just show up wearing pants.
I've said this.
Don't bring up. No, because Jack never wears pants during the show.
Really?
Andrew compares me to the dude from The Big Lebowski.
Yeah. That's what.
Well, we're going to have to hang out sometime now. Not pants, but, other reasons.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and I'd like to have you back sometime in the future.
I would be happy to, because like I said, I owe you at least 20, 25 minutes here, and I apologize for that.
That's all right. Thanks
All right,
for coming on. And good luck on the book and on the DVD.
Thanks a lot. Good luck with the show, and I'll be looking for it to see if I made an answer to myself.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hey, don't miss out. Stay with Dr. Death in your head on the internet. One of the best radio you can listen to. In your head. Come on with Dr. Death.